In 1904, thousands of visitors swirled through the crowded World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. Fairgoers were desperate for quick fuel to keep walking through the massive, stifling exposition grounds. Food vendors originally tried serving standard beefsteaks on formal plates with traditional metal cutlery. But busy crowds refused to sit down for a slow, proper meal. One clever vendor took a grilled beef patty and jammed it between two slices of soft white bread. Patrons walked away happily, eating hot meat with their bare hands while on the move. This simple convenience created the modern hamburger, changing global food culture forever. So, how did we get from raw minced meat on horseback to a standard sandwich on every corner? The journey spans thousands of miles, 2 continents, and a total shift in how humans work, travel, and eat. The origin of minced meat actually begins far from modern cities. In the 13th century, Mongol horsemen rode across the vast steppes of Central Asia. These nomadic warriors needed fast food that required no fire. They placed raw scraps of mutton or beef under their saddles. As they rode long distances, the pressure tenderized the meat. The sweat from the horses lightly salted the cold flesh. Riders shredded the meat and ate it raw while staying in the saddle. This raw meat dish traveled west along trade routes. It eventually reached the busy port cities of the Baltic Sea. The next real breakthrough came when Russian trade expanded into northern Germany. German merchants in the port of Hamburg adopted this raw minced meat preparation. They refined the recipe with local European ingredients. Local cooks chopped the beef finely with sharp knives. They mixed the meat with onions, capers, and local spices. They called this savory, raw dish steak tartare. It became a popular meal among working sailors. But raw meat spoiled quickly on long sea voyages.
That fix created a new problem. Sailors needed a way to preserve their meat at sea. In the 18th century, cooks began lightly grilling or smoking the chopped beef. Heat killed dangerous bacteria and kept the meat edible for days. They called this cooked meat product a Hamburg steak. German immigrants brought this recipe with them across the Atlantic Ocean. By the 1840s, millions of Germans arrived in the United States. They opened small taverns in bustling port cities like New York. They listed Hamburg steak on their chalkboards to attract homesick immigrants. The dish was a thick, salted beef patty served with gravy and potatoes. It was a rich meal, but it was still meant for sitting down at a table. The Industrial Revolution soon pushed millions of Americans into fast-paced factory work. Factory workers had short lunch breaks and little spare cash. They needed something hot, cheap, and portable. Vendors began selling grilled Hamburg steaks from wooden pushcarts outside factory gates. But customers struggled to hold a greasy, scorching piece of meat with bare hands.
The next real breakthrough came when food vendors solved the problem of portability. In the late 19th century, several independent cooks had the same simple idea. In Seymour, Wisconsin, a young vendor named Charlie Nagreen ran a small fair booth in 1885. He noticed visitors wanted to walk around the fairgrounds while eating. Nagreen flattened his Hamburg steaks and placed them between 2 slices of home-baked bread. Around the same time, the Menches brothers in Ohio ran out of pork sausage for their fair sandwich. They substituted seasoned ground beef and sold it as a new meat sandwich. In Texas, Fletcher Davis placed a fried beef patty on thick Texas toast with mustard and white onions. The humble meat patty had finally found a permanent home between bread. This creation split into 2 divergent paths: urban street carts and rural roadside stands. Urban vendors fed factory workers during quick midday shifts. Roadside stands fed travelers exploring America's expanding road networks. But the early hamburger still faced a massive public perception problem. In 1906, Upton Sinclair published his famous novel, The Jungle.
The book exposed shocking, unsanitary conditions inside American meatpacking plants. The public grew terrified of ground meat, assuming it contained scraps, floor sweepings, and dangerous filler. Sales of Hamburg steaks plummeted across the nation.
That crisis forced a radical transformation in how food was prepared and sold. In 1921, Billy Ingram and Walter Anderson opened the first White Castle restaurant in Wichita, Kansas. They were determined to restore public trust in ground beef. They built small buildings out of gleaming white porcelain and stainless steel. Employees wore spotless white uniforms and caps. The kitchen was placed directly in front of the counter. Customers watched cooks flatten fresh, pure beef onto hot griddles. White Castle sold small, square burgers for just 5 cents each. Cleanliness and standardization saved the industry. The burger was no longer just a cheap street snack for factory workers. It had evolved into a respected, mass-produced staple of the American diet. Just like those Mongol horsemen riding across the steppes, Americans had perfected a way to eat meat on the move. The final piece of the puzzle came with the birth of the modern drive-in. In the 1940s, Richard and Maurice McDonald redesigned their California restaurant. They eliminated car hops, plates, and ceramic cups. They created an assembly line system to serve burgers, fries, and shakes in seconds. Every burger was identical, cheap, and wrapped in paper. The car culture of the 1950s carried this model across the country. Highway systems expanded, and fast food arches rose beside every exit. What began as a rough survival meal for warriors was now a global commodity. The story of the hamburger is not a story of single brilliant invention. It is a story of continuous adaptation driven by human movement and speed. From cold steps to hot factory gates, we repeatedly reshaped food to fit our changing momentum. Those hungry crowds at the St. Louis World's Fair simply proved what history had been building toward all along. Convenience always wins.